Most people think they're healing. They read the books, they journal, they set intentions, they make New Year's resolutions, and yet nothing really changes. The anxiety returns, the patterns repeat, the same relationships, the same exhaustion, the same self-sabotage. Carl Jung believed there was a reason for this. You cannot heal while your psyche is still in survival mode, and most people never realize they're still trapped inside it. Survival mode is not just stress. It's not just being busy. It's not even trauma itself. Survival mode is a psychological state where the psyche is organized around threat avoidance rather than growth. Jung observed that when the psyche is dominated by fear, it does one thing above all else. It narrows consciousness. In survival mode, you don't explore, you defend, you don't reflect, you react, you don't integrate. You fragment, your mind becomes tactical, not truthful. And the tragedy is this: survival mode can feel productive. It can look responsible. It can even look successful. But internally, the psyche is frozen. Jung warned that healing requires conscious encounter with repressed emotions, shadow material, painful memories, inner contradictions. But survival mode blocks this. Why? Because the psyche believes if we slow down, we die. So instead of healing, you intellectualize, you distract, you optimize, you spiritualize, you manage symptoms instead of transforming the root. Jung called this a false adaptation, adapting to a toxic system instead of questioning it. And here's the key insight: the psyche will not heal in an environment it still perceives as unsafe. Survival mode is often maintained by toxic systems, not just internal wounds. This can be a family dynamic, a relationship, a workplace, a cultural expectation, even an identity you've outgrown. Jung noticed that people stay loyal to systems that damage them because those systems once ensured survival. The psyche says, "This hurt me, but it kept me alive." So leaving feels like death. This is why people stay in draining relationships, stay in jobs that hollow them out, stay in identities that no longer fit, not because they're weak, but because their nervous system hasn't updated. Jung's concept of the shadow becomes especially powerful here. In survival mode, the shadow grows. Why? Because everything that threatens stability gets pushed underground. Anger, grief, desire, boundaries, authentic impulses. These don't disappear. They wait, and eventually they emerge as burnout, depression, self-sabotage, addictions, sudden life collapses. Jung believed these breakdowns are not failures. They are signals. The psyche saying, "I can no longer live this way." One of Jung's most misunderstood insights: you cannot outthink survival mode. Affirmations don't work here. Motivation doesn't work here. Willpower doesn't work here. Because survival mode is not cognitive. It's instinctual. Trying to stay positive while ignoring danger is what Jung called neurosis, a split between inner truth and outer behavior. True healing begins when the psyche feels, "I am no longer trapped." So, what actually helps? Jung would point to 3 shifts. 1. Safety before insight. You don't analyze your way out. You change conditions. That might mean distance from a toxic environment. Rest without guilt. Slowing down enough to feel again. 2. Making the unconscious conscious. This is where reflection returns. Dreams, symbols, patterns, emotional reactions. Not to judge them, but to listen. 3. Individuation. This is Jung's ultimate goal. Individuation means living in alignment with your true nature, not just what kept you safe. It often requires leaving something behind. And yes, it feels terrifying, because growth always feels like death to the old psyche. If you feel stuck, if healing feels impossible, if you keep working on yourself, but nothing changes. It may not be because you're broken. It may be because your psyche is still trying to survive something that's already over. Jung believed healing begins not with fixing yourself, but with recognizing that you no longer need to live as if you're under threat, and that realization changes everything. When people realize they're living in survival mode, they often make a dangerous assumption. They think the solution is to leave immediately, quit the job, end the relationship, burn the old life down. Carl Jung warned that this impulse, while understandable, can be just as destructive as staying stuck, because leaving survival mode is not an escape. It is a psychological transition, and transitions, if rushed, can collapse the psyche. Jung observed that people rarely fear pain. They fear the disorientation. Survival mode provides something crucial: predictability, structure, identity. Even suffering becomes familiar. When survival mode begins to loosen, the psyche enters what Jung called a liminal state, a psychological in-between. You are no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. This is where anxiety spikes, not because something is wrong, but because the old map no longer works. Jung warned against what he called inflation. This happens when the ego believes insight alone is enough. People say, "I've outgrown this. I'm awakened now. I don't need structure anymore." But the nervous system may still be fragile. Leaving a toxic system without building internal stability can lead to depression, dissociation, panic, identity collapse. Jung believed freedom without grounding is not liberation. It's psychological freefall. One of Jung's most overlooked ideas is containment. Before transformation, the psyche needs a container. This can be a routine, a practice therapy, solitude, nature, creative work, something that holds you while the old identity dissolves. Jung himself went through this during his confrontation with the unconscious. He didn't abandon his life entirely. He built ritual, structure, and reflection around the chaos. Containment prevents collapse. Survival mode trains us to project power outward. We believe the job controls us, the family defines us, the system owns us. Jung taught that individuation requires withdrawing projections. This means realizing, what I fear losing was never the source of my identity. This is not arrogance, it is maturity, and it is terrifying. Because when projections dissolve, responsibility returns. No one talks about this part. Leaving survival mode involves grief. You grieve the person you had to become. The time you lost, the version of you that survived. Jung believed grief is not weakness, it is integration. Only what is mourned can be released. Skipping grief keeps people psychologically tied to the past. The goal is not to become fearless. The goal is to build a life where constant defense is unnecessary. Jung believed healing looks like slower rhythms, deeper relationships, meaningful work, symbolic connection, inner authority. You don't need to escape society. You need to stop abandoning yourself within it. Leaving survival mode is not dramatic. It is quiet. It feels uncertain, unglamorous, sometimes lonely. But Jung believed this is where life begins to feel real. Not safer, not easier, but truer. And once the psyche tastes truth, it rarely agrees to live in survival again.